Why have certain pieces of knowledge been locked away, hidden from eyes and hearts yearning for truth? This question resonates like a silent thunderclap in the untold chapters of history. Over the centuries, as kingdoms rose and empires crumbled, a quiet force moved through the cracks of visible reality, carrying teachings that challenge not only institutional logic but the very foundations of what we deem reality. This force, shrouded in shadows and symbolism, is the legacy of the Enlighteners of ancient Europe, an order that not only preserved ancient wisdom but dared to share it, even at the risk of the stake. They sought neither glory nor domination. Their aim was subtler and deeper, to reignite the spark of human consciousness, dimmed under the weight of dogma and fear. The Order of the Illuminators didn't emerge from a specific point in history as a formally established organization with defined leadership. Instead, they arose naturally from humanity's intrinsic need to understand the unseen. Born from the blending of ancient spiritual, philosophical, and scientific traditions, their predecessors came from diverse backgrounds, ranging from druids who listened to the whispers of trees to Egyptian priests who mapped the heavens to comprehend the soul. What united them was the recognition that there was something more, a hidden truth beneath the veil of everyday reality. They understood that ignorance is the greatest prison, and thus dedicated themselves to breaking the chains of the human mind through profound, experiential, and transformative knowledge. Contrary to the prevailing narrative, knowledge didn't just thrive in palaces or universities funded by feudal lords. Long before that, there were underground networks of learning connecting masters and apprentices in forests, caves, hidden temples, and even markets, all under the guise of simple trades. These gatherings were not merely intellectual, they were rituals of energetic and spiritual transmission. Each lesson was infused with intention, and every symbol carried a field of consciousness. The wisdom of the Illuminators wasn't memorized, it was lived, and that's why it endured. Not as doctrine, but as a flame passed from soul to soul. The threat posed by this movement to the established powers was not military or economic, but existential. They taught that human beings were more than just flesh and sin, more than mere servants or subjects. They claimed that within each person lay an entire universe, a spark of the divine waiting to be awakened. This idea endangered the very foundations of the Church, which insisted it was the only path to God, and the state, which relied on blind obedience as its primary means of control. As a result, the Enlighteners were constantly targeted for persecution, surveillance, and silencing. Yet, like seeds carried by the wind, their teachings took root in unexpected places, often far from the watchful eyes of authority. One of the most intriguing aspects is how this order used secrecy not as a means of exclusion, but as a shield against destruction. They understood that certain truths couldn't be shared openly, as they would be distorted, ridiculed, or exploited for selfish purposes. Therefore, they turned to symbols, metaphors, and hidden codes. Paintings, stories, architectural works, and even games contained layers of meaning intended for those with discerning eyes. Art became their silent library. A trained eye could uncover more about the human soul from a medieval tapestry or a Gothic rose window than from entire volumes of theology. As the shadows of the Middle Ages deepened, the Illuminators learned to adapt. They took on disguises: artisans, monks, doctors, astronomers. They concealed their identities, but never their mission. Amidst disease, war, and famine, they offered solace and wisdom to the few who were willing to listen. And those who did listen were never the same again. Through the mists of time, stories emerge of inexplicable healings, mystical visions, and ideas that sparked like lightning in seemingly simple minds. The Illuminators did not seek to establish a religion. Rather, they aimed to remind humanity of what it had once known, but had forgotten. There are fragmented records, nearly erased by time, that speak of mysterious figures who would appear in villages and vanish without a trace after imparting life-changing teachings. These accounts, often dismissed as legends, carry a hint of truth. The presence of the Illuminators was frequently unseen, yet their influence was undeniable. A simple astronomical map handed to a peasant, a book left in a forgotten chapel, a conversation by the campfire. These were gestures that ignited inner flames, often spanning generations. Perhaps the most impressive aspect is the consistency with which this order, even from the shadows, knew when to take action. They didn't force revelations, they waited and observed the cycles. They understood that true transformation is internal and spontaneous. They cultivated a patience that spanned centuries. While they accelerated the awakening of some, they respected the slumber of others. They were gardeners of consciousness, sowing seeds in silence. Some of them lived entire lives without ever being recognized as masters, and that was exactly how they wanted it. For the ego was the first illusion to be transcended. The origins of the order aren't tied to a specific location, but there are strong indications that its most active presence was in regions such as Brittany, Gaul, the Iberian Peninsula, the Italian Alps, and even within Germanic territories. These were places where the natural spirituality of ancient peoples already thrived, and where institutional Christianity initially struggled to establish itself. It was in these cultural and spiritual havens that the Illuminators took root, blending local knowledge with teachings from the East and Africa that arrived through travelers, merchants, and wandering mystics. Each enclave of the order was unique, adapting universal principles to fit the local culture, honoring traditions, and fostering harmony with nature. At the heart of this mission lay an unshakable belief. Knowledge is a fundamental right of the soul. It should never be confined by dogma or treated as a privilege for the few. So, while the world outside splintered into religious, political, and economic disputes, the Enlighteners dedicated themselves to unity. They understood that true power doesn't come from imposing will, but from inner growth. Freedom is only complete when it springs from a deep understanding of one's own essence. This is precisely why their teachings endure, not in stone monuments, but in awakened souls. Thus, the first key emerges, the call to remember. There's no more time to stay asleep in the face of the truths that have been denied to us. The Illuminators still whisper, not in ancient tongues, but in the silence that arises when we close our eyes and listen to our hearts. They are not in the past. They exist in the present, alive in each of us who dares to seek beyond appearances, beyond the narrative crafted by the victors. The order has never ceased to exist. It has simply waited for us to be ready to listen. When words were silenced, symbols became the voice. To evade the scrutinizing eyes and heavy hand of those who feared humanity's awakening, the Illuminators had to create an alternative language, a means of communication that could transcend generations and borders, unscathed by the flames or manipulated by the scribes of power. This language wasn't spoken or written in the conventional sense. It was felt, perceived, and deciphered through intuition and silent contemplation. It was a language of sacred geometries, subtle colors, and metaphors encoded in myths, stained glass, and stone labyrinths. A living language that spoke directly to the souls of those ready to remember what they had always known but had forgotten under the weight of time and oppression. The symbolism was the alphabet of the invisible. Each symbol carried multiple layers of meaning, like overlapping portals that opened according to the viewer's level of awareness. A flower sketched in an ancient manuscript might be seen by some as merely decorative. For others, it could represent a map of the soul, and for the initiated, a reminder of the universe's hidden structure. The triangle, the circle, the eye, the spiral. These were all seemingly simple elements, yet they had roots in civilizations long before medieval Europe. The Illuminators understood that symbols served as shortcuts between the physical world and the higher realms of perception. They knew that while the linear mind would attempt to interpret, the soul would quietly recognize. They also understood that while oral tradition was powerful, it was susceptible to being forgotten. To combat this, they left traces of their knowledge in the most unexpected places. In the sculptures of cathedrals, the marks left by stonemasons on columns, the stained glass of churches, the patterns of carpets, and even in popular games like chess and tarot. Each image, gesture, and combination of colors and shapes carried a deeper story. The tarot cards, for instance, are one of the most explicit legacies of this coded language. Far more than mere divination tools, they represented spiritual archetypes, stages of the journey of consciousness, and symbolic maps that guided the seeker through the veils of illusion toward inner clarity. Stories and legends have long served as vehicles for this veiled language. The folk tales of medieval Europe, often dismissed as mere fantasy or superstition, conceal beneath layers of Christian moralism profound initiatory narratives and teachings. The hero who ventures through the dark forest, encounters the wise sage, defeats the beast, and returns transformed is not just embarking on an adventure, it's an allegory for the soul's journey toward integration. The witches, so feared and persecuted, often symbolize the guardians of ancient wisdom, possessing knowledge of herbs, lunar cycles, and healing practices that eluded dogmatic medicine. All of this was conveyed through stories, safe enough to avoid suspicion, yet powerful enough to resonate with the inner codes of those who listened. In the surviving manuscripts, we observe a consistent strategy. Symbols that precede the text, margins filled with enigmatic figures, and colors and proportions that adhere to principles beyond ordinary aesthetics. The golden ratio, the mandala, the hexagram, these recurring elements, when deeply understood, unlock keys to the connection between the human microcosm and the universal macrocosm. The Illuminators recognized that visual language eludes censorship and resonates with profound aspects of existence. A true symbol doesn't impose meaning, it awakens it. It doesn't instruct, it reveals. It's no coincidence that during times of intense repression, these symbolic expressions became more pronounced. It was as if the collective unconscious of humanity was compelled to create outlets for expression to avoid being stifled. Renaissance paintings rich in esoteric illusions, architectural designs aligned with celestial precision, and music featuring harmonic scales capable of altering states of consciousness. All of these were part of a vast, silent communication network, an ancient internet where each element served as a link connecting the seeker to primordial wisdom. However, only those who had genuinely awakened a sincere desire for knowledge could access this network. The use of codes also appeared in hidden writing. Manuscripts like the undeciphered Voynich and the Gnostic texts found at Nag Hammadi reveal a deliberate effort to safeguard spiritual content from external corruption. Many of these texts employed layers of language, where the literal concealed the symbolic and the symbolic masked the initiatory. This was the pedagogy of the Illuminators, giving each person according to their thirst. The curious received myths. The seeker was given keys. The initiate received silence, because only in emptiness does revelation occur. Numbers also played a crucial role. Numerology, inherited from Chaldean and Pythagorean traditions, was used as a vibrational system to understand the nature of things. For the Illuminators, the universe was not composed of matter, but of proportions, frequencies, and recurring patterns. The number 7, for instance, represented the stages of internal transformation, while 12 symbolized the cyclical wholeness of the human journey. Astrological maps were created not just to predict events, but to grasp the hidden structures of existence. Everything was rhythm, and knowledge was a symphony that needed to be listened to with the ears of the spirit. They understood the importance of not just preserving the content, but also keeping the interpretive code alive. That's why they trained initiates to see beyond mere appearances. Their learning was not passive, it was experiential. The disciple learned to read the stones, decipher the winds, and listen to the whispers of the fire. They were taught to perceive reality as a sacred text, where everything communicates. A flower was not just a flower, it was the embodiment of cycles, hidden equations, and subtle messages sent by the spirit of life. In this way, the Illuminators shaped readers of the invisible, navigators of the symbolic, and decoders of existence. Over time, some of these codes began to be embraced by other traditions and orders, which partially carried this legacy forward, such as the Rosicrucians, alchemists, Freemasons, and even certain mystical Christian and Sufi sects. However, many lost their original depth, crystallizing into formal rituals that lack true spirit. The genuine language of the Illuminators demands something that cannot be feigned, an awakened consciousness. Without it, a symbol is merely a design. With it, it transforms into a mirror. In today's world, these codes are still very much alive. They can be found in movies, logos, songs, and works of art that resonate with us deeply, often without us even realizing why. They appear in our dreams, in coincidences, and in the patterns that unfold before us, inviting us to remember. The world, despite its seeming disconnection, continues to communicate with us through the symbols left by those who came before, and those who learn to listen to them rediscover the path to their inner selves. The Illuminators taught us that nothing is as it seems. Beneath the surface of what we see lies a realm of information that, when accessed, can completely transform the way we live, think, and feel. Symbols are the keys to this realm. They weren't created for decoration or entertainment, but to unlock doors. And perhaps the greatest of these doors is right in front of you at this very moment, waiting for you to recognize it. Amidst the dense forests of medieval Europe, shrouded in morning mists and sheltered by the vastness of forgotten valleys, there existed secret refuges where the Illuminators preserved not only their physical bodies but also the essence of the knowledge they carried. These sanctuaries, camouflaged by nature and often mistaken for simple monasteries, remote villages, or ancient ruins, served as vibrant centers for spiritual, philosophical, and energetic transmission. Each stone of these structures seemed to pulse with memories that official history sought to erase. The Illuminators understood that the location was sacred, chosen with precise astronomical and geomantic considerations, as they knew that certain points on Earth resonated with subtler planes of existence. They sought the intersection between the visible and the invisible, where physical reality became more porous, more accessible to the awakened soul. These sanctuaries were not merely places of refuge, they were instruments of elevation. Within their walls, silent rituals, deep meditations, and symbolic transmissions unfolded with almost mathematical precision. There was no rush, no sense of urgency. Time took on a unique shape in these spaces, where the sun seemed to rise with a different brilliance and the nights danced with the whispers of stars that felt closer than ever. The Illuminators regarded these spaces as emanations of higher consciousness. They resembled initiatory schools, yet they did not operate like conventional academies. Each space was distinct, tailored to the energies of the location and the purpose of the lineage that gathered there. Some were hidden beneath abandoned churches, others lay within forgotten castles, and some, even older, were labyrinthine caves where voices echoed like oracles. One of the most renowned sanctuaries, still shrouded in layers of legend and mystery, was what many referred to as the Chamber of Dawn. Allegedly situated in the mountainous regions between France and Switzerland, this place was described as a temple carved into the very heart of the stone, safeguarded by hidden symbols and accessible only through trails marked in ancient codices. Here, masters of the order gathered initiates during specific cycles, aligned with the equinoxes and solstices. The teachings imparted were not limited to reading texts or memorizing doctrines. They encompassed transformative experiences, energy healing, intuitive revelations, guided visualizations, and rituals for spiritual transmutation. The very architecture of the site induced altered states of consciousness. The walls seemed to vibrate, and those who entered felt as though time itself was dissolving. What transpired there could not be put into words, it could only be felt. But these weren't the only places. Other strongholds, like the mysterious hidden libraries in the Italian Alps, the astral centers deep within Gaul, and the temples disguised beneath Gothic cathedrals, safeguarded manuscripts and artifacts deemed dangerous by the religious authorities of the time. The Illuminators understood that preserving knowledge didn't mean locking it away in a vault. It meant keeping its essence alive through constant and mindful use. Therefore, the sanctuaries served as places of practice, not just conservation. Teaching occurred through action. The disciple learned to read the sky, translate the sounds of nature, decipher their own dreams, and recognize the subtle currents of inner life. Each lesson was imparted in a sensory and experiential manner, never imposed or standardized. It was knowledge shaped to fit the soul of the recipient. The presence of the Templars in certain regions provided, for a brief period, an unexpected layer of protection for these sanctuaries. While not all Knights of the Temple were connected to the Illuminators, many of their high-ranking members had been initiated or maintained ties with ancient lineages. The Templar fortresses served not only to safeguard physical relics, but also housed underground chambers where rituals of hidden wisdom were conducted in secrecy. When the order was dismantled, many of these Templars sought refuge in the very sanctuaries of the ancient order, bringing with them documents, star maps, alchemical instruments, and fragments of sacred texts translated from Arabic, Hebrew, and Greek. As a result, these sanctuaries became even more intricate, true melting pots of cultures, languages, and knowledge, keeping alive the flame of what once illuminated great civilizations. It's important to understand that these spaces were not just hidden in the physical realm, but also in time. Many of them could only be accessed during specific times of the year, when vibrational doors opened through precise cosmic alignments. This was a science that intricately combined astronomy, astrology, and spirituality. The Illuminators recognized that the cosmos was not a static backdrop, but a living organism, and that certain portals would open when the heavens whispered the right passwords. It was during these moments that secret pilgrimages took place. Small groups, guided by symbolic signs, traversed hostile territories, braving harsh weather and dangers, all to reach the sanctuary at the exact moment. And there, in absolute silence, they received teachings that would be passed down through generations. Even the most famous monasteries in Europe held remnants of these beings in their cellars and crypts. The Montserrat Monastery in Catalonia, the Abbey of Cluny in France, and certain hidden areas of the Vatican are imbued with symbolic traces and documented records that suggest contact with this hidden wisdom. However, the greatest secret was not found in books or relics, but in the monks and initiates themselves, who became living guardians of this memory. Many of them led seemingly ordinary lives, blending in as librarians, scribes, healers, or hermits. Yet there was an unusual spark in their eyes, a serene presence that only those who have glimpsed the infinite can possess. The routes that connected these sanctuaries were meticulously mapped out. They weren't obvious paths, rather they were symbolic trails, sometimes aligned with the stars and other times following the Earth's energy meridians. Many of these routes are now forgotten or destroyed, but traces of them linger in local legends, in carvings on roadside stones, in ancient Templar crosses, or in isolated monuments that seem to have no reason for existing where they are. Yet they did. They served as points of orientation, vibrational landmarks, reminders for those who knew how to see. The Illuminators understood that true refuge wasn't found in physical spaces, but within oneself. These sanctuaries, no matter how beautiful or well protected, merely mirrored the sacred space that exists inside each individual. The external architecture was a reflection of the architecture of the soul. Domes, columns, narrow passages, spiral staircases, all echoed the internal processes of ascension, purification, and integration. To be in a sanctuary was to be within oneself. This was the ultimate lesson imparted to every initiate. The temple is you. Once this understanding took root, the disciple no longer needed a physical place, for they carried the sanctuary within their consciousness. Unfortunately, over time, many of these places have been looted, destroyed, or reduced to lifeless ruins. Ignorance and fear led to their walls being violated, their artifacts stolen, and their histories distorted. But the Illuminators were prepared for this. They anticipated the attack. That's why they spread copies, disguised texts, and fragmented symbols. They created a spiritual puzzle that could only be pieced together by those guided not by ambition, but by a sincere call from the soul. Throughout the centuries, these seekers have found clues in dreams, intuitions, and coincidences. Even without a physical map, they were led step by step to where the truth quietly pulses. Even today, there are active sanctuaries, perhaps not in their original form, but in essence, they remain. Some have been rebuilt in different ways, as meditation centers, eco-villages, or contemporary initiatory schools. Others, still unseen, await the spiritual heirs of the order to awaken and carry on the work. Then there are those who reside within individuals, human beings who, even without ever having heard of the order, carry the essence of these sanctuaries within them. By simply being present, they reignite dormant memories in others. Because the true sanctuary cannot be destroyed. It is made of the fabric of eternity. It resides in the unseen, nourishes itself on silence, and blossoms in the hearts of those who remember. No truth that threatens the power structure escapes unscathed. It was precisely because they dared to teach that humans possess a divine spark that the Illuminators became targets of the most violent persecution ever recorded against hidden knowledge in Europe. For centuries, these guardians of wisdom were hunted, silenced, tortured, and executed by religious and political systems that viewed the expansion of consciousness as a direct threat to their control over the masses. The Order and its disciples, once operating discreetly in the folds of time and geography, became invisible enemies of a force that wielded the cross as a sword and fear as its altar. The Inquisition, the Crusades, and the heresy trials were not merely religious operations. They were systematic strategies to erase a spiritual network that dared to remind humanity of its true nature. The onset of systematic persecution coincided with the Church's rise as an arm of temporal power. As the Vatican expanded its influence over kings and emperors, the need to monopolize not just physical territories but also the realms of the soul intensified. Those who taught alternative doctrines spoke of reincarnation, energy healing, internal alchemy, direct connection with the divine, or engaged in unauthorized spiritual practices quickly became targets of suspicion for heresy. Among the first to be scrutinized were the Illuminators. Their symbols were deemed profane, their writings branded as blasphemous, and their gatherings portrayed as demonic conspiracies. In many instances, a formal trial was unnecessary. Mere suspicion was enough for a death sentence to be handed down. One of the most ruthless strategies employed to undermine the Order was the use of collective fear. Rumors circulated about dark rituals, pacts with evil forces, and behaviors that defied societal morals. These whispers served to isolate the Illuminators from their communities, turning former allies into informants and fostering a climate of widespread distrust. Many were betrayed by neighbors, friends, and even family. Paranoia turned anyone into a potential traitor, and safety eroded even in the most secure sanctuaries. Yet the Order stood firm. They understood that the price of truth was steep and that spiritual integrity demanded courage in the face of death. The accounts of the inquisitorial sessions serve as harrowing testimonies of the horrors endured by these masters. Torture methods such as the rack, the wheel, the press, and the pyre were employed not only for punishment, but also to extract names, maps, and codes. The aim was to completely dismantle the network of hidden knowledge, annihilating not just bodies but the living connections between masters and disciples. Many chose absolute silence, preferring martyrdom over the risk of betraying their fellow seekers. Amidst indescribable physical suffering, they remained focused on a greater reality, on a promise made to the soul even before birth, to protect the light at all costs. Despite the brutality of the persecutions, the Order developed escape and disguise mechanisms that allowed for its partial survival. They created secret routes through forests, mountains, and underground passages. Safe havens were organized with hidden exits, false doors, and tunnels dug beneath abandoned convents. Children and young people with potential for initiation were hurriedly taken to safe locations, where they could be trained away from the inquisitorial gaze. Manuscripts were buried, sealed in stone or metal containers, and hidden in hard-to-reach places. In many cases, the texts themselves were fragmented and scattered across different locations to prevent the capture of a single guardian from jeopardizing the entire collection. Amidst this devastation, legendary figures emerged, martyrs of wisdom who stood their ground until the very end. Among them were masters like Isolde of Avalon, whose healing songs were deemed witchcraft, yet continued to resonate through generations, and Elias of Rhodes, an alchemist who concealed formulas and maps within musical compositions. There are also accounts of a network led by a woman known only as the Sentinel of the North, who organized escapes between Scotland and Scandinavia, keeping the thread of ancient tradition alive. These names, erased from official records, are now preserved through oral traditions and secret documents still held by the spiritual descendants of the Order. The massacre of the Cathars in southern France, particularly at the fortress of Montségur, marks one of the bloodiest chapters in this spiritual hunt. These men and women, many of whom were directly connected to the lineage of the Illuminators, were besieged, burned alive, and exterminated for defending an alternative vision of spirituality. They rejected papal authority, preached simplicity, and sought a direct connection with the divine, while safeguarding manuscripts deemed dangerous to the prevailing orthodoxy. The fall of Montségur was not just a military defeat, it was symbolic. It represented an attempt to completely eradicate a body of knowledge that, in the eyes of those in power, could never be allowed to survive. However, even under the weight of repression, the flame did not extinguish. The teachings of the Enlighteners found new channels, infiltrating later esoteric orders such as the Rosicrucians, the Unknown Philosophers, and more recently, the Freemasons. Practices were adapted, symbols reinterpreted, and rituals codified in increasingly elaborate ways. It was survival through transformation. The original knowledge dissolved into new forms, yet its essence remained intact. Masters continued to be trained in silence, in attics, basements, caves, and isolated monasteries. The darkness of repression only intensified the need to keep the inner light burning. The Church, despite all its power, couldn't completely erase the traces, partly because many of its own members secretly sympathized with hidden wisdom. Priests, monks, cardinals, and even popes maintained contact with forbidden writings, delving into astrology, alchemy, and mysticism. There was an underground division within the very ecclesiastical structure. Some sought the total destruction of the Illuminators, while others saw an opportunity for spiritual renewal that the institution had never managed to achieve on its own. This ambiguity created fissures, hidden passages through which knowledge continued to seep, like water penetrating even the hardest stone. The Renaissance was, in part, an indirect product of this quiet resistance. Contrary to popular belief, the cultural rebirth in Europe was not a spontaneous phenomenon. It was the result of centuries of secret ferment. Hidden writings began to surface, buried ideas resurfaced, and forgotten names were celebrated once more. Many artists and thinkers of the time had direct connections to the remnants of the order. They painted, wrote, and sculpted not just to express beauty, but to revive ancient codes, awaken memories, and reignite the spark of hidden knowledge that the fires of the Inquisition failed to extinguish. No matter how cruel the attempts to silence them have been, what the persecutors never understood is that true wisdom cannot be killed. It can be buried, distorted, or discredited, but it will always find a way to rise again. For wisdom doesn't just live in books or rituals. It resides in the very essence of the human soul. Each fallen master, every burned manuscript, and every destroyed sanctuary did not signify an end, but rather the multiplication of the spirit of the order. Like seeds scattered in the wind, they spread, took root in new hearts, and transformed suffering into strength, and persecution into purpose. Thus, the Illuminators learned to navigate between worlds, both the physical and the invisible. They understood that the true battlefield was not external, but internal. Real victory wasn't about defeating the enemy, but about remaining untainted by them. The pursuit, no matter how painful, only served to further refine the clarity of their mission. It made them more selective, more subtle, and more resilient. Those who inherited their flame still carry this silent mark today, the steadfast gaze of someone who has faced the darkness and chosen to keep shining. After centuries of shadows and silence, a new dawn began to break over Europe. What history refers to as the Renaissance was not merely a revival of the arts and sciences. It also marked the slow and strategic return of wisdom that had been brutally suppressed. The Enlighteners, scattered across generations of repression, found in the cultural and intellectual fervor of the 15th century a fertile ground to subtly resume their ancestral mission. However, this resurgence did not unfold in grand festivals or opulent palaces. Instead, it emerged quietly behind brushes, scientific compendiums, philosophical treatises, and literary works rich with symbolism. The rebirth of the order was not institutional but vibrational, an expansion of consciousness through human expressions that resonated with something deep, familiar, and long forgotten. The order, under various disguises and new names, began to weave its codes into the circles of artists, scientists, and thinkers. This strategy, which combined concealment with subtle influence, ensured that the forbidden teachings reached an ever-expanding audience without triggering the same fierce repression seen in previous centuries. Instead of hidden sanctuaries in the mountains, there emerged studios filled with enigmatic paintings, workshops of alchemists, and discreet societies gathering restless geniuses by candlelight. These new bastions of wisdom sprang up in Florence, Venice, Nuremberg, Prague, Toledo, and other cities that became vibrant centers of cultural transformation. Leonardo da Vinci was one of the most iconic figures of this strategic renaissance. Although he is officially recognized as an artist and inventor, his work is rich with symbolic layers that can only be understood through the lens of esoteric language. His anatomical studies went beyond mere scientific curiosity. They were explorations of the temple of the spirit. His masterpieces, such as The Last Supper and Mona Lisa, are imbued with sacred proportions, hermetic illusions, and hidden messages meant for the awakened eye. Da Vinci didn't just possess knowledge. He was a custodian of ancient wisdom, cleverly disguised as modern genius. His connection to the Illuminati was implicit, shielded by the brilliance of his mind and the carefully crafted ambiguity of his words. Giordano Bruno was another figure who, though less protected, carried the indomitable spirit of the order within him. A philosopher, cosmologist, and mystic, Bruno preached the infinity of the universe, the existence of multiple inhabited worlds, and the divine presence in all things, ideas that were utterly unacceptable to the orthodoxy of his time. His vision posed a direct threat to the closed cosmos controlled by dogma. As a result, he was burned alive in 1600, but his words and ideas have endured through the centuries like embers that refuse to die out. Bruno was a bearer of forgotten wisdom, a link between ancient mysteries and the science of the future. His death was not a defeat, it was a clear signal that the flame had reignited, too intense to be ignored. At the same time, figures like Paracelsus, Cornelius Agrippa, and Marsilio Ficino paved the way for a reconnection between medicine, astrology, philosophy, and alchemy, fields that had been forcibly separated by the imposition of a fragmented rationality. These men understood that healing the body was closely tied to the balance of the soul and harmony with the rhythms of the universe. Their treatises, often ridiculed by official academic circles, were in fact veiled manuals for inner transformation. Their laboratories were sacred spaces, where metal was not merely a substance to be transformed, but a symbol of the human soul undergoing purification and elevation. It was also during this period that the first clear signs of the symbolic reconstruction of the order emerged in the form of discrete societies. The Rosicrucians, though shrouded in mystery, represented a deliberate attempt to restructure the spiritual lineage of which the Illuminati had been an essential part. Their manifestos, such as the Fama Fraternitatis and the Confessio Fraternitatis, proclaimed the existence of an ancient hidden brotherhood dedicated to elevating the human spirit through universal wisdom. This order did not require formal membership. Instead, true initiation was vibrational and internal. One had to earn it, remember it, awaken to it. It was not just about belonging. Freemasonry, which emerged in the following centuries, also absorbed significant fragments of ancient wisdom. Although it has become institutionalized and lost some of its original essence, the deeper layers of its rituals, degrees, and symbols still resonate with the ancient teachings passed down by the order. Columns, tools, geometries, and allegories all point to a spiritual science that transcends mere ritualistic appearances. The construction of the inner temple, the refinement of the rough stone, and the ascent through degrees. These are metaphors inherited from times long before the formal establishment of modern Freemasonry. They represent expressions of a spiritual pedagogy that the order has preserved, even under the most challenging circumstances. During the Renaissance, secret libraries began to be re-established. Manuscripts that had previously been hidden were copied, translated, and rewritten in renewed codes. The newly invented printing press was employed by members of the order to spread texts disguised as philosophical or scientific works. Many hermetic treatises, attributed to fictional authors, circulated at fairs and universities, often escaping the notice of censors who failed to grasp the depth of their content. This represented a new form of spiritual guerrilla warfare. knowledge infiltrating the very system that had once persecuted it. The order had learned to navigate the shadows, but now it was starting to learn how to move within the light itself. In this process, the arts played a central role. Painters, sculptors, architects, and musicians, each of them, in a way, were initiates. Their works were not merely aesthetic expressions, they served as vessels for spiritual resonance. Cathedrals were once again built based on sacred geometry. Gardens were designed as symbolic maps of the inner journey. Songs were composed in specific frequencies, activating subtle centers of perception in the listener. The order had begun to breathe, to move, to sow once more. But this time, its strength came not from the rigidity of structure, but from the flexibility of vibration. It was present in many, though unnamed by any. At the same time, universities began, albeit cautiously, to reintroduce certain topics that had previously been deemed heretical. Studies on the cosmos, the human body, and the psychology of the soul all found a place under the umbrella of science, driven by quiet masters who understood the origins of these ideas. Many professors were initiated in esoteric schools that operated on the fringes of official knowledge. Their lectures, seemingly ordinary, were filled with symbolic hints and philosophical questions that planted seeds in the minds of the more sensitive students. It was a refined method of spiritual contagion, slow yet effective. A master didn't need to reveal everything. It was enough to awaken the dormant memory within others. This phase of the order was not about confrontation, but rather infiltration. The secret lay not in isolation, but in the ability to blend into all systems. To survive, one had to be invisible, yet also accessible enough to teach. The Illuminators of that time didn't wear robes or speak on behalf of any specific tradition. They were painters, writers, astronomers, alchemists, musicians, and doctors. They mingled among everyone, yet were recognized by only a select few. Their eyes revealed the depth of those who had traversed many veils. Their speech was measured, precise, and vibrant. Their actions, though discreet, were transformative. The resurgence of the order during the Renaissance wasn't a formal restoration. It was an internal revival. The spiritual lineage was re-established not through decrees, but through resonance. The flame was reignited in hundreds of souls who, even without fully understanding why, felt a profound calling, a relentless desire to seek something greater, to grasp the unseen, to break free from the chains of ignorance. This was the true Renaissance, not a return to old forms, but the reawakening of a spirit that had always been present, waiting for the right moment to bloom once more. And that moment had finally arrived. In times when books could mean death and free thought was treated as a crime, the Illuminators shared a wisdom that not only challenged established dogmas, but also offered a vibrant and revolutionary alternative to the dominant worldview. But what exactly did they teach? What ideas were so powerful that they sparked relentless persecution and centuries of enforced silence? The answer lies in the very core of humanity, for everything the order preserved revolved around reclaiming the true nature of consciousness. It wasn't just the content that was forbidden, but what it ignited, a liberating realization that the divine resides within each individual and that the evolution of the soul is a conscious, ongoing, and inevitable process. The first principle taught by the Illuminators was both simple and radical. The human being is a miniature universe, a reflection of the macrocosm, endowed with spiritual structures that, when understood and activated, lead to enlightenment. This teaching, found in ancient traditions like Hermeticism, Taoism, and Vedic wisdom, was woven into the doctrine of the order in a practical and vibrant way. Belief alone was not enough. One had to experience it. Therefore, knowledge was imparted progressively, through degrees of initiation, honoring the maturation process of each soul. The initiate was guided to discover their true self, not through external impositions, but through practices that expanded perception and dissolved the shackles of the ego. Among these practices, deep meditation played a central role. Not a passive meditation, but an active one, focused on observing subtle bodies, perceiving energy centers, and listening to the inner silence. The art of conscious breathing was taught, along with symbolic visualization and the use of sound vibrations to reorganize mental and emotional patterns. The physical body was regarded as a sacred instrument, a temple for an evolving spirit. Nutrition, sleep, and movement were all observed with care, as it was understood that the vibrational quality of matter directly influenced the awakening of consciousness. Daily life served as the training ground for the soul, and every gesture, no matter how simple, became an opportunity for inner refinement. Another crucial aspect of their teachings was the idea that time is not linear, but rather cyclical and multidimensional. The Illuminators viewed existence not as a single experience of birth and death, but as an ongoing process of learning through multiple incarnations. Reincarnation was not just a theory, it was a reality experienced through visions, lucid dreams, subtle memories, and spontaneous regressions. They believed that emotional wounds and repetitive patterns in one's current life were remnants of unresolved experiences from past lives. Thus, self-knowledge also involved recognizing the timelines that make up one's being. Healing, therefore, was about coming back together. According to their teachings, the soul is layered. It isn't just an abstract concept. Rather, it's a living structure made up of levels that need to be harmonized. From the etheric body to the causal and spiritual planes, each layer has specific functions, perception gateways, and its own language. Emotions, thoughts, dreams, everything is part of this dynamic system that the Illuminators referred to as the architecture of inner light. Initiation involved traversing each of these levels, understanding them, purifying them, and ultimately integrating them. A fully realized soul is one that becomes self-aware across all planes, capable of acting with clarity in both the visible world and the subtle realms. The knowledge held by the Illuminators revealed that everything in the universe is interconnected by a vibrational web. This subtle network, which we might refer to today as the unified field, was described by them as the living mind of the whole. Every thought, every emotion, every action emitted a frequency that spread out, creating waves of resonance that shaped reality. This is why they placed such great emphasis on vibrational responsibility. What you think, feel, and do affects not only your own life, but the entire web of existence. This understanding rendered any notion of external salvation obsolete. Humanity did not need intermediaries between themselves and the divine. They were co-creators, directly responsible for their own rise or fall. Spiritual alchemy was another cornerstone of their teachings. However, unlike the caricatured notion of turning lead into gold, the Illuminators viewed alchemy as an internal process of transforming consciousness. Lead symbolized the heavy aspects of being, fear, ignorance, attachment, while gold represented the radiant expression of the soul, the wisdom that comes from lived experience. The alchemical laboratory existed within the initiate. The tools were their mind, heart, and vital energy. The processes involved purification, the dissolution of old patterns, the integration of polarities, and vibrational ascension. It was a demanding yet liberating path, a journey where the initiate died to who they thought they were and was reborn as their true self. A particularly dangerous teaching for the powers of the time was the connection between spirituality and freedom. The Enlighteners taught that a spiritually awakened being could never be controlled by fear, manipulated by promises, or subjected to external authorities. An awakened individual is free because they understand their origin and purpose. Therefore, the established political and religious order saw these teachings as a direct threat to their structure of domination. The liberation of the soul inevitably meant the breaking of the chains of the system. A people free in spirit cannot be governed by force. Thus, it wasn't enough to burn books. It was essential to burn consciousness. However, once consciousness is ignited, it can never return to a state of being extinguished. The order also taught that material abundance was a reflection of an inner state of alignment, rather than an end goal in itself. Prosperity was seen not as accumulation, but as a flow. They emphasized living in harmony with the natural laws of giving and receiving, energy circulation, cooperation, and creativity. A truly prosperous initiate was someone who radiated from within, whose presence healed, whose words inspired, and whose actions sowed transformation. Thus, the true abundance taught by the order was one of awakened consciousness, capable of manifesting higher realities. None of this involved magic in the popular sense, but rather the science of vibration and fields, something that quantum physics is only just beginning to uncover. The order didn't impose dogmas, it offered keys. The seeker was free to unlock doors or stay where they were. Knowledge was shared with reverence and demanded responsibility. There was no room for vanity, ambition, or haste. The journey was personal, yet never solitary. The masters observed from a distance, guiding with wisdom but never interfering with the disciples' free will. This spiritual pedagogy honored the soul's rhythm. Each lesson arrived at just the right moment, each revelation at the perfect instant. Nothing was rushed, nothing was forced. The Illuminators understood that true knowledge isn't just about accumulation, it's about transformation. That's why intellectual understanding, while valued, was never the ultimate goal. The emphasis was on integration, knowing, feeling, living. The initiate wasn't merely a scholar, they were a being in constant metamorphosis, with their entire life becoming a reflection of the teachings. Words were accompanied by silence. Ideas were backed by action. Knowledge was infused with presence. In this way, the order shaped complete beings, not just brilliant minds. This was the forbidden teaching, that human beings are not lost or inherently corrupt, but rather asleep. Within each person lies a hidden sun, waiting for the right moment to emerge. The awakening of this sun doesn't rely on external miracles, but on an internal decision to remember. Once this memory is activated, it illuminates everything. What once seemed distant, mysterious, and unattainable becomes simple, natural, and eternal. While their presence may have been more pronounced in the misty landscapes of ancient Europe, the true origins of the Illuminators extend far beyond this continent. Their wisdom did not originate there. It was sown by a lineage that traces back to ancient civilizations whose footprints are lost in the mists of time. The order, at its core, is a branch of a much larger river, flowing through ages and continents like a silent current of spiritual knowledge. What manifested among the druidic groves, hidden monasteries, and secret orders of medieval Europe had already flourished millennia earlier along the banks of the Nile, in the plains of Mesopotamia, in the Himalayas, and in the hidden jungles of Mesoamerica. The Illuminators were, therefore, guardians of a planetary heritage, not just a European one. They carried the echo of a collective memory that transcends races, religions, and empires. Among the deepest roots of the order lies ancient Egypt, not the Egypt of tourist pyramids and idealized pharaohs, but the mystical Egypt of mystery schools, initiatory temples, and esoteric practices that shaped the foundations of humanity's spiritual knowledge. There, the priests of Isis and Thoth not only studied the heavens, but also understood the soul as a reflection of the stars. The Illuminators inherited from this legacy the belief that true wisdom is gained through initiation rather than mere instruction. The soul is refined in stages, much like gold is purified by fire. The temples of Karnak, Dendera, and Luxor, among others, were vibrant centers of this initiation, where many teachings that would later flourish among European alchemists and mystics were already regarded as sacred science. Another civilization that profoundly nurtured the roots of the order was Sumer, whose spiritual complexity still eludes modern scholars. The cuneiform texts provide clues about knowledge systems that integrated astrology, vibrational medicine, sacred geometry, and interdimensional connection techniques. Names like Enki and Inanna are not merely mythological figures. They symbolize archetypal forces that the Illuminators learned to recognize and harness. The Sumerians' relationship with the stars, nonlinear time, and the so-called gods points to a deep understanding of parallel realities and cosmic interactions. The Illuminators absorbed from this tradition the idea that the human soul is part of a vast stellar ecosystem and that, upon awakening, it becomes capable of communicating with intelligences that transcend the physical realm. In the East, particularly in Vedic India and pre-Buddhist Tibet, the order found resonance and depth. The Vedas, Upanishads, and Tantric teachings explore multi-dimensional realities, chakras, kundalini, and elevated states of consciousness, all of which were embraced and reinterpreted by the Illuminators within their own tradition. Retreats in the mountains, silent masters, deep breathing practices, and contemplation all echoed what the order had already grasped intuitively. Many travelers from the lineage traversed perilous routes to Asia to study with monks, ascetics, and yogis, returning to Europe with new spiritual maps that would be translated into hermetic symbols and coded treatises. The concept of Mahasamadhi, the conscious departure from the physical body, was studied as an advanced stage of internal transmutation, reserved for those who had mastered the limits of matter. In Mesoamerica, among the Maya and the Toltecs, the Illuminators recognized the same universal language encoded in symbols, numbers, and structures. The pyramids of Teotihuacan, Chichen Itza, and Palenque were not merely temples. They served as three-dimensional maps of spiritual evolution. The Mayan calendars did more than track time. They unveiled the interconnectedness of consciousness, cosmic cycles, and planetary transitions. The Illuminators understood that these cultures, beneath their complex ritualistic appearances, preserved the same essence passed down by the initiates of Egypt and India. The idea that humans are potential suns, that earthly existence is merely a stage for the soul, and that death is a lucid passage was shared almost identically across these traditions. In the tradition of Australian Aboriginals, the Illuminators discovered another crucial piece of their spiritual puzzle: dream time. This non-linear perspective of reality, where the past, present, and future coexist within a single framework, deepened the Illuminators' understanding of soul journeys and the realms of information accessible beyond rational thought. Aboriginals did not have temples, books, or religious hierarchies, yet their stories, songs, and paintings encoded a highly precise cosmic knowledge. Engaging with this worldview helped the Illuminators realize that knowledge isn't confined to texts and rituals. It's also found in how reality is perceived, felt, and narrated. On the ancient trails of China, guided by the teachings of the Tao and the I Ching, the order discovered a profound understanding of fluidity and impermanence. The concept that the universe is governed by complementary forces, yin and yang, that dance in perpetual transformation resonated with the principles of internal alchemy that the Illuminators sought to impart. The Tao cannot be named, only experienced, the Chinese masters would say, an assertion that the Illuminators recognized as a reflection of their own beliefs. The incorporation of qi, vital energy, acupuncture, and silent meditation helped to weave healing and rebalancing practices into the order's learning centers, tailored to Western realities, yet rooted in a universal understanding of the body as a tool for expansion. The order also acknowledged the connections between Celtic teachings and the shamanic traditions of Siberia, Africa, and North America. The Druids, with their wisdom rooted in trees, the Earth's cycles, and the constellations, practiced rituals strikingly similar to those of shamans who journeyed between worlds in search of healing, guidance, and enlightenment. Drumming, trance, dance, and the use of sacred plants were all integral to an ancient pedagogy where the body and nature served as the textbooks. The Illuminators studied these traditions with humility, recognizing a form of knowledge that is nonverbal, sensory, intuitive, and deeply intertwined with the essence of life. They learned that wisdom is not the exclusive domain of any civilization, but rather a legacy of the earth itself, which speaks through its awakened children. The legacy of Atlantis was regarded by many masters of the order as a part of humanity's original memory. While officially dismissed as a myth by historians, to the Illuminators, Atlantis symbolized the ancestral remembrance of a civilization that had mastered spiritual, technological, and natural laws to an extraordinary degree before its downfall due to vibrational imbalance. The flood, which appears in nearly every culture around the globe, was not just a literal event, but also a symbolic one, representing the drowning of inner knowledge in the waters of collective forgetfulness. According to records preserved by the order, many of the surviving Atlanteans migrated to regions such as Egypt, the Andes, the Himalayas, and Central America, carrying with them fragments of primordial wisdom. Thus, the Illuminators viewed their mission as a part of reclaiming that lost connection to the beginning. This global network of knowledge wasn't a coincidence. It was a reflection of a unified consciousness that expressed itself in various cultures, tailored to their unique needs and contexts. The symbols were strikingly similar: winged serpents, all-seeing eyes, pyramids, spirals, solar crosses, and sacred numbers. The spiritual language of humanity was singular, translated into diverse dialects. The order recognized this and committed itself to studying the interconnections, reconstructing the hidden map of universal wisdom. Its learning centers became true hubs of enlightened syncretism, where traditions once viewed as separate were understood as integral parts of the same cosmic organism. The work of the Illuminators was never about establishing a new tradition. Rather, it was about reminding us of the unity that underlies all traditions. They served as translators of the soul, connectors of scattered knowledge, and restorers of lost memory. What they taught in Europe reflected the wisdom they gained from cultures around the world. Their legacy was not a doctrine, but a vibration, a presence, a seed of awakening that continues to flourish in souls ready to remember. Over the centuries, as humanity delved into the technical advancements of modernity, the presence of the Enlighteners became increasingly subtle, almost imperceptible. Industrialization, rampant rationalism, and the rising emphasis on mechanistic logic pushed aside knowledge that couldn't be quantified or demonstrated by the standards of linear science. The world was moving toward the precision of numbers, the efficiency of production, and the standardization of thought. In this context, the hidden knowledge that once inspired souls and ignited civilizations was relegated to the realms of mysticism, superstition, or literary fantasy. The Enlighteners, already accustomed to their invisibility, retreated once more to more subtle planes, continuing their mission in an almost unnoticed manner, while the noise of the surface grew louder. Silence became their shield, and forgetfulness their strategy. What remains of their teachings has survived in fragments, hidden between the lines of overlooked books, in misunderstood works of art, and in rituals forgotten by orders that have lost the essence of their own foundations. Much of what is presented today as contemporary occultism is a caricature, a simplified distortion of what the Illuminators preserved with such care. The language has been corrupted, symbols drained of their meaning, and ritualistic practices reduced to hollow performances devoid of true intention. Many have sought the power of the ancients without grasping their purpose. The form endures, but the spirit has been forsaken. And when the spirit departs, the sacred becomes mere spectacle. Still, one cannot deny the subtle persistence of the echoes of the order, in the symbolic architecture of historic buildings, in the melodies of certain classical pieces, and in the narrative structures of tales and myths that still resonate deeply. One can perceive, if one's gaze is trained, the presence of something greater. The order that never formally acknowledged its existence continued to act as a silent guardian, inspiring thoughts, provoking doubts, and stimulating intuitions in individuals who, even unknowingly, connected to the original vibration. The call never ceased. It simply became harder to hear in a world deafened by artificial stimuli and constant distractions. During the 19th and early 20th centuries, there were deliberate efforts to reclaim some of this ancient wisdom. Movements such as European esotericism, theosophy, the revival of Hermeticism, anthroposophy, and archetypal psychology sought to reconnect the modern world with deeper spiritual dimensions. Figures like Helena Blavatsky, Rudolf Steiner, and Carl Jung drew, either directly or indirectly, from the sources preserved by the vibrational descendants of the Illuminators. Blavatsky openly spoke of the existence of a hidden white brotherhood, guardians of ancestral knowledge. Steiner described the evolution of human consciousness in cycles, addressing themes that resonated directly with ancient esoteric teachings. Jung, for his part, with his theory of archetypes and the collective unconscious, touched on precisely what the Illuminators have always safeguarded, the human soul as a mirror of the universe. Despite this, the power of mass culture and the industrialization of thought proved to be stronger. New generations became increasingly disconnected from the invisible. Materialism emerged as the dominant paradigm. Reality began to be defined solely by what could be perceived through the physical senses and what could be measured by scientific instruments. The invisible, the symbolic, and the spiritual were relegated to the status of subjective beliefs, lacking practical relevance. The figure of the wise sage gave way to the specialist. The mystic was replaced by the technician. Silence was drowned out by the relentless noise of information. The world, flooded with data, became impoverished in wisdom. However, amidst this landscape, certain signs have never faded away. Cinema, for instance, has emerged as one of the most powerful modern mediums for subtly conveying ancient teachings. Many screenwriters and directors, whether consciously or not, have channeled stories that strikingly echo the archetypes of the hero's journey. Films like The Matrix, Star Wars, The Lord of the Rings, and Inception carry, beneath their entertaining surfaces, profound messages about awakening, illusion, transformation, freedom, and reconnection with one's essence. The hero who uncovers hidden truths, confronts their fears, breaks free from the matrix, and returns transformed embodies the classic structure of ancient mysteries. The Illuminators, even when not explicitly mentioned, continue to manifest in modern myths. Another realm where the echoes of the order remain vibrant is in art. Many artists experience a creative inspiration that goes beyond the rational during their creative process. They paint, write, or compose as if guided by an invisible force. This force is often the same one that directed the initiates of ancient sanctuaries. The creative impulse serves as a direct channel between the human spirit and the realm of universal wisdom. When art is authentic, it communicates through symbols, resonates with deep layers of the soul, and awakens forgotten memories. Even in contemporary works, one can observe recurring symbolic patterns: the spiral, the eye, the fire, the tree, as unconscious attempts to reconnect with the primordial code. In recent years, with advancements in neuroscience, quantum physics, and studies on consciousness, we have witnessed a new convergence between science and spirituality. Researchers now discuss non-local information fields, the impact of observation on reality, and the interconnectedness of all things, concepts that the enlightened ones understood and conveyed in different languages centuries ago. Physics is beginning to align with mysticism, not through belief, but through observation. The universe has shifted from being seen as a machine to being recognized as a vibrational field. Matter has transformed from a mere substance into condensed information. Thought has evolved from being an internal process to becoming a part of what shapes reality. We are, slowly but surely, rediscovering what had long been forgotten. However, this rediscovery requires spiritual maturity. It's not about reclaiming wisdom to gain power, control, or an advantage over others, but rather to align with the truth of one's own essence. The enlightened have always warned against the dangers of spiritual ego, that trap where knowledge becomes a tool for superiority instead of service. The true initiate is humble because they understand their origins and their mission. They recognize that all knowledge comes with responsibility and that awakening is not an individual achievement, but a collective service. For this reason, the order has never presented itself as an organization. There were no temples with signs or public leaders. There was only vibration, presence, silent souls acting where needed, activating memory wherever possible. Many traditions that today claim to be heirs of ancient mysteries have lost the essence of their teachings by clinging too tightly to form. They have preserved symbols but forgotten their meanings. They repeat rituals without understanding their transformative power. The garments, words, and gestures are merely shells. The true, vibrant energy lies beyond. This energy can only be transmitted from heart to heart, from soul to soul. The real teaching is not visible. It reveals itself in the quiet transformation of those who receive it, and it only endures where there is purity of intention. The modern silence is, in part, a result of the voluntary withdrawal of the enlighteners. They understood that humanity needed to forget in order to learn how to remember on its own. They recognized that imposed truths can become a prison. Each soul must embark on its own journey, make mistakes, stumble and doubt before it can truly rediscover itself. The silence of the order was not an act of cowardice. It was an expression of trust. Trust in the process of human consciousness. Trust that, even when surrounded by chaos, misinformation, and superficiality, the soul would eventually find its way back to the thread of truth. And that thread isn't found in books or external traditions, but within each individual. As they always taught, the sanctuary lies within. No matter how forgotten it may seem, the order has never truly disappeared. It has simply taken a step back. Now, in this new cycle, it begins to rise again, not as an institution, but as a frequency. Those who resonate with this frequency will recognize their kin, not through words, but through presence, not through doctrine, but through harmony. The new era demands less form and more truth, less rhetoric and more resonance, less focus on the past and more on the present. The order lives on, and the silence that shrouded it for centuries is about to be broken by a new kind of sound, the sound of memories awakening in the hearts of those who are ready. Amidst the ashes of a distorted history, among the ruins of forgotten temples and scattered manuscripts lost to time, one question echoes with increasing urgency. Does the order still exist? Or has it completely dissolved, fading into the mists of collective memory, reduced to a mere myth for those seeking meaning in the unseen? The answer isn't found in libraries or in organizations that claim to be the heirs of the occult. The answer lies where it has always been, within the depths of every individual who dares to ask, feel, listen, and remember. The order was never an institution. It is, and always has been, a vibration, a field of consciousness, a silent frequency that transcends the centuries and ignites in the hearts of those who awaken to the remembrance of what they truly are. It has no physical headquarters or external hierarchies. It doesn't present itself as a religion, philosophy, or system. It doesn't require oaths, sell initiations, or create followers. The order expresses itself through actions, through presence, through silent vibrations. It lives in the healing gestures of those who extend a hand without expecting anything in return, in the eyes of those who look deeply and listen beyond words. It manifests in conversations that resonate at a profound level, in encounters that awaken memories without a rational cause. It reveals itself in art that moves us without explanation, in music that lifts the soul, in nature that speaks in silence. Wherever there is truth, coherence, presence, and compassion, there the order pulses, invisible and intact. Today's illuminators don't wear robes or carry ancient leather-bound books. They blend in with ordinary people. They walk through cities, travel on buses, and work in hospitals, schools, offices, markets, and communities. They don't proclaim their involvement in anything. They simply are. They embody wisdom quietly, living out their teachings through their very presence, without the need for announcements. They don't seek disciples, knowing that no one is a master over another. Their mission isn't to convert, but to remind. And this reminder emerges when their presence resonates beyond words. The true initiate is one whose mere existence inspires change, not through persuasion, but through resonance. The order, as a consciousness, functions like a living network of attuned souls. There is no center, there is no hierarchy. The bond that connects them is internal. It is the awakened consciousness. Throughout history, even in the darkest times, there have been points of light ignited by this network. Today, with the entire planet interconnected through technology, the globalization of information, the acceleration of time, and an ever-growing existential thirst, this vibrational field is expanding with renewed vigor. Each individual who awakens, who chooses to live authentically, who seeks integration between spirit and matter, and who places love above fear, becomes a luminous node in this silent network. The order is being rebuilt, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. There is no initiation ritual. The gateway opens through the conscious decision to align with the deepest truth of one's being. When someone chooses integrity, compassion, clarity, and service, they are automatically welcomed in. And once you're in, there's no going back. Because there's no place to leave, there's only a state of being. The ancients referred to this as awakened remembrance. It's the remembrance of purpose, the remembrance of origin, the remembrance of a commitment made long before this incarnation. It's the remembrance that we are here to ignite light where there is forgetfulness, to remind others of what they themselves promised to forget, and to keep alive the flame that sustains the invisible thread between heaven and earth. The New Order does not oppose any religion, culture, or tradition. Instead, it transcends them all. It recognizes that the sacred is not confined to any one form. Every form is temporary. What endures is the essence, and the essence is free, expansive, silent, and vibrant. The New Order honors all sincere paths that lead to the center. It does not demand a break, but rather seeks integration. It does not impose, but inspires. It does not dogmatize, but invites. Its role is to nurture the soil of consciousness, preparing the ground for each soul to blossom in its own color, its own light, and its own sound. Modern technologies, when used mindfully, become tools of order. The internet, for instance, is now an external reflection of the ancient invisible network of masters and disciples who communicated through symbols, dreams, and synchronicities. Today, these connections happen on platforms, through videos, social media, e-books, and instant messages. Yet the principle remains the same. It's the vibration that passes from one being to another, awakening something that was dormant. Secret knowledge, which once needed to be safeguarded with codes, is now accessible to anyone, but it still requires the same level of responsibility. Information is everywhere, but true teaching can only be grasped by those who have activated their inner ear. Wisdom has never been about what is spoken, but about what is vibrated. Every person who feels this calling, even if only faintly, is being touched by the ongoing legacy of the Order. This continuity doesn't rely on titles, certificates, or public recognition. It emerges when an internal decision is made, to live as a channel of light, to embody truth, to serve as a guardian of memory. Today's initiate no longer needs to hide, but neither do they need to announce themselves. Their presence, coherence, and vibration are their only credentials. They don't seek applause, knowing that true work is often invisible. They don't defend themselves, understanding that silence speaks louder than any explanation. They don't compare themselves to others, recognizing that each soul has its own timing, path, and sacred rhythm. The Order endures because it has never relied on external acceptance for its existence. It thrives on the inner commitment of souls who have chosen to serve the light, even amidst darkness. These souls have embraced rebirth countless times, enduring pain, exile, persecution, and forgetfulness, all to keep alive a seed that is now, at last, beginning to bloom on a larger scale. Humanity stands at a turning point. The old mental structures are crumbling, the lies that upheld empires are falling apart, and every individual who awakens becomes a beacon in this turbulent sea. Contrary to what many believe, the Order did not come to save. It came to remind us that salvation is not found outside ourselves or in someone else. It is within us. It is here. It is now. Those who carry this legacy know it instinctively, even without proof. They feel it, even in the absence of evidence. They recognize it, even without words. And when they come together, even for just a fleeting moment, there's a silence that speaks volumes, a glance that affirms, a gesture that reconnects. They are children of the same flame, guardians of a shared fire, travelers on a common mission. They're not here to persuade, but to resonate. They're not here to clash with the old world, but to bring forth the new. They are bridges between worlds. They are living memories. They are the illuminators of the present. The Order no longer needs to hide, yet it will still remain invisible to distracted eyes. It can only be seen by those who look with an awakened heart. It is understood only by those who have chosen the truth. It is inhabited by those who have realized that the temple is the self. And serving the light means, above all, living with wholeness. Wholeness in thought, in feeling, in action. This is the new form of the Order, a formless body yet present, a flame without an altar yet warm, a network without a center, yet resonating with a unified vibration. She lives within you. She resonates in us. She waits for nothing, because it's already happening. The legacy endures, and the time for remembrance is now. If this content resonated with you, please share in the comments which symbol, idea, or feeling sparked your awareness while watching. When many people share the same intention, the manifestation grows stronger. Your words could ignite another mind right now. And don't stop here. On your screen is the next step in this journey. The Book of 33 Steps, the hidden map Jesus left for enlightenment, where the development continues and the hidden map unfolds layer by layer. You are mind unfettered, free, aware, and connected minds. Share, comment, and walk together.